So look, yes, I am quite capable of looking at data, and yes, I am quite aware of where Puffin currently sits in terms of competitive tournament level performance. But I just can't shake this feeling in my gut that she's incredibly underrated right now. Puffin is a mech hero with card velocity, tricks that are in line with attack reactions, and massive tools like Palantir Aeronaught. So, I mean, come on, she just screams potential. And especially at the armory level, Puffin seems really decent. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there folks, so just super quick before we get into this, I had shot this a few days ago and it was all ready to go, and then last night, at least of the time I'm shooting this, I went to my armory, and Jesse, one of our local mech players, went 3-0 on the day with Puffin. So yes, that's only one data point, but it is one more data point to the point of today's video. So just keep that in mind going through. Enjoy, and go Commando. Hey there, my Flesh and Blood friends. Welcome back to the channel, and thanks so much for tuning in here, not just on your Flesh and Blood Monday, but on the last Flesh and Blood Monday before we head into Worlds in Philadelphia, and we see how this whole meta ends up shaking out in terms of who's going to get the big win and the LL points and who will be the talk of the town after that, at least headed into January when we get the next set. So I admit that headed into Worlds, it might be a little weird that I want to talk Puffin kind of on this last day. And to be clear, that's not necessarily because I think Puffin's going to do well at Worlds. As I mentioned in the intro, the data certainly points that things are against her. That said, there isn't really, I think, a hero I fear out there more as like a sleeper hero than Puffin. And I believe that, at least at the local level and the regional level, I do think she's highly underrated. So I'm really excited to see what happens here over the coming week as we head into Worlds. Will there be some sleepers that show up and do well at Worlds? I don't know. I'm very much looking forward to see that. So when Puffin is able to get her Cogworks engine running, and of course a few cogs on the board, she really offers a lot of upside and can close out games in a pretty explosive way. An Aeronaut with 3 cogs, or the untap equivalent, is an absolutely crazy closer even just to shift momentum. But even just at a baseline level, Puffin's cogs can absolutely change the math of a game. So in a video shortly after the release of High Seas, Beware of Puffin and her cogs, I had both praise for Puffin's potential and a warning that we need to make sure to double count her cogs in many cases. I gave the example of Cogworks Dovetail and how I totally botched blocking correctly one time with pretty major consequences. Because of the on-hit effect of Dovetail and the fact that cogs can be tapped for either +1 or go again, opponents can have extremely difficult decisions to make on this one. If an opponent overblocks to account for the reset, then Puffin just gives it go again and follows up with a pistol shot. And if they don't block correctly, well, Puffin does the same thing anyway, but in this case maximizing the damage and with the reset, untapping, and going into a pistol shot anyway. It's really a win-win for Puffin, and I actually think that this serves as a perfect analogy for Puffin as a whole. Yes, she's a different mech than we're used to, but that's also why I think she's underrated. And in Flesh and Blood, with so many good specialists out there, underrated can be a very dangerous thing. While there's certainly no denying that Puffin has not demonstrated herself as a top-tier contender, I do believe she's a super strong choice at the local and regional level, and that's why I wasn't surprised to see her pick up at least a few PQ wins, and I would expect that to repeat in the upcoming RTNs. At the local level of play, where we tend to see a more diverse meta in which specialists can shine, Puffin's versatility and unpredictability becomes a huge asset. Puffin can be built in several different ways. She can function as a fast and aggressive deck, supplementing her Cogworks package with the above-rate OG boost cards like Zero and Zipper, and adding in some crank toys like Red Protocol for recycling and feeding the card draw engine. Or she can play a more mid-range game with a focus on her Zeppelins, generating value over time with her cogs and using her card draw to out-resource her opponent over the turn cycle, and extracting extra value off nearly spent cogs by galvanizing. And it's this versatility that makes Puffin really hard to play into, as opponents cannot always predict exactly what her approach is going to be when you sit down at the table. And now look, I know this is maybe a risky statement to make given the fact that Puffin has been in the game for over a full set cycle now, But I suspect the primary reason that she isn't more favored in the meta is really just that she's lying in cult specialist territory. And when her class cousin -IO is doing as well as she is right now, well, it makes sense to me that we would see mech players gravitate that way, right? Instead of going to Puffin. So it's just, I think, that she isn't seeing widespread specialist attention, at least right now. So with the understanding that much of my argument today is actually based on that surprise factor and the inexperience of playing into her, I'm sure it's to the chagrin of the Puffin mains out there that I do want to take a quick look at how she works, as well as go into actually a deck concept. So at its core, Puffin's playstyle revolves around cranking and maintaining an ever-decaying board state of cogs. Now, these cogs can be cranked when they enter play to feed her engine, but that's not her only path. She can run some of the more traditional crank cards as well. Boom grenades may be better from a top deck, granted, but they still demand blocks, and Red Protocol allowing for recycling of some of her big weapons is also a legitimate tool. And while the decaying nature of cogs presents an ongoing challenge for her to maintain board state, it does facilitate a pretty natural interaction with an awesome Puffin tool, the Bright Lights card Soup Up, often coming in for 4 go again and enjoying the trigger benefit of your cog leaving the field. Cog set to expire also great fodder for Galvanize, assisting both with slightly more efficient defense and in the case of something like Golden Skywarden, also creating the gold that Puffin needs to create cogs, thus getting extra value out of something that you were really going to lose anyway. And finally, on top of all of that, Polycranka serves as a bailout for a constrained turn, but stays on the field and can keep doing the thing. You got to kill that bird the first chance you get, because leaving that dirty bird around equates to card advantage. And because Puffin is also a pirate, don't forget that she can do pirate things like run Conqueror of the High Seas, threatening your arsenal choices. And see, that's really another thing with Puffin that I find really attractive. With Mechanologists and boosts, we'd often got used to them running really only mech cards, but that's not a constraint that Puffin is necessarily tied to. She doesn't really need to boost, meaning she is often released from that particular constraint. She could run D-Reacts or even pummels if she so chooses. Now, that's not to say in any way that she's not still susceptible to fatigue. Eventually, she will run out of either cogs or cog generation. But when Puffin is able to develop and maintain her board state, it becomes incredibly difficult to stay above water in terms of blocking and health, building up to that Aeronaught. So the concept deck that I want to look at today is a more typical Cogworks-based deck, but with some non-mech tools in there to threaten as well. So link is below. You can check it out and follow along with me. But again, this is a pretty basic overall concept build called Pirate Puffin Cogs. And of course, you know me, I like to put the emojis in my deck list so I can find them from that Teleshard dropdown nice and easy. So you do see the loadout. I do believe that Spitfire is the correct gun. It's also the one I've seen most Puffins playing in the grand scheme of things. And I do think that she works pretty well with Tunic. Now, Unicycle, right, this is your Puffin card because it gives you the untap. Now remember, a very key part of this is when it says if you have tapped 3 cogs, right? So let's go to Aeronaut, right? If this is the 3rd time you've activated this ability, right? So to be clear, I misspoke technically earlier to my point. It's not if you've tapped 3 cogs, it's if you've tapped a cog 3 times, meaning you could tap the same cog, right? Which is very, very, very important to Puffin's ability of D-reacts and then resets and instants and all that, okay? So, of course, I have backspin thrust in there. Now, I do have crank card backup protocol for some recycling. I'm not running boom grenade in this particular list. Cog in the machine is great because you can also do recycling. It helps you stave off stuff a little longer. We're heavy into the Zeppelins. We have Conquer the High Seas because, I mean, come on. Now, one card that I don't see a lot of folks playing, which, I'm running this because it's a gorgeous card out of Gym Pack, and I mean, you should, but it also feels really good to me because it's next Mechanologist attack. So, you know, depending on how things play out, at the very least, it boosts your gun. So I really, really like that. I'm on Red Blue Soup Up because it's great. We're on 3 Palantir Aeronaughts, no shock there. We're on 3 Golden Skywardens. I'm on 6 cogs, but 3 of them are in the board, okay, for more blues or more fatigue or whatever it may need to be. Now, I'm on 6 blocks. Sunken Treasure, I think, is a windmill slam. A lot of the decks out there I've seen are playing only 2 sentries instead of 3. It is a lot of block, but again, they're also blues, so you kind of got that going for you. Now, one card that I don't see a lot of folks playing is Lubricate. So this is an instant for 0, but it untaps up to 3 cogs, right? So generally you're probably not, doing it for the full 3, but maybe, right? The point is of trying to get to your Aeronaught, you only have 2 cogs on the table. Maybe you only have 1 cog on the table in your unicycle, whatever, right? Just get a cheeky little play in there with the Aeronaught and blow up a Van Braces or, whatever it may be. So that's the play. Now going into the inventory, I've got CNC. See, this is stuff that we can play with her. I have CNC, Fate Foreseen to look at the top deck. We have Pummel, and then we have, the AB stuff that you might need, not playing Polarity in this particular build. So again, conceptually, what this is really trying to do is get those cogs on the table and take advantage of Puffin things while also being able to just play normal cards because you're not focused on your boost, right? So look, the current competitive meta is certainly a bit unkind to Puffin and almost certainly favors -IO right now. And obviously, as more and more players shift from being hero-focused players to class-based players, it then makes sense that the default for them would be to shift to the better-positioned hero, right? But it's Puffin's second-choice status that makes me think she's underrated, because I think that a good player with Puffin can absolutely abuse her very strong tools and her cog tricks. And when you combine that with a general inexperience by most of the folks out there, certainly not at Worlds, right? But most of the folks out there don't have a ton of practice into her yet. So when you combine it with that, I think you have a really good chance to do pretty well at your armory or even your local regional events, right? Puffin, to me, is underrated because her true strength isn't immediately apparent. She requires a practice player to unlock her, do well with her, but when they do, Puffin's card advantage, her versatility, and her explosive turns can really make her a force to be reckoned with. Now, I will openly admit that Specialist isn't me, but I am grabbing reps into Puffin every chance I get so I can learn how to not make my mistakes again, because I don't want to screw up that Aeronaught math. So in closing, I do want to reiterate, don't sleep on Puffin and her cogs. If not managed correctly, from a blocking standpoint, it will, trust me, result in disaster, and it'll give free damage to your opponent. And on top of that, it is always best to assume that everyone running her right now knows what the heck they're doing, so be on your A game. And of course, my friends, go Commando.